Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty right now. However, we hope we should have it rectified very, very soon. Welcome to this, what is the date today? The 23rd of May edition to the Free Thought Forum. I'm Doug Diggins, and our co-host here, Jacob. Say hello, Jacob.
Hello.
Well, that was a mumble. Anyway. Okay.
Just keep going.
Yep.
We're still
Well,
recording.
anyway, like to remind everyone about the Anvil Memorial Day Parade, which is being held on Saturday, May the 27th. Normally, we are a participant in this. We're one of the marchers, and we represent Pennsylvania non-believers. And you'll see our banner there. The parade itself actually begins at about 9 a.m. However, there's past experience, it's just came to show that it usually gets delayed a little bit until it's on. Once again, it looks like we've corrected our technical difficulties here, and we're talking about the Anvil Memorial Day Parade being held on Saturday, May the 27th, of which we will be a participant. And the parade begins at 9 a.m., but it's suggested that you arrive at the staging area no later than 8 o'clock if you want to march in it. It's about a 2-mile march, or it's a little less than 2 miles, and it's fairly flat. If you'd like to come down and join us, be sure to do so. It's just like a leisurely stroll, and the parade comes to a rest quite often when they're trying to keep the spacing between all the different floats and marches that are there. So it's not like you're going to be running your butt off there. You have plenty of time to relax and catch your breath, and it's very, very entertaining. And we've been doing the Anvil parade amongst many others for many years.
Doug, the one thing nice about the Anvil parade is after the 2-mile parade, you end up about 200 feet from where you started, because it's a great big U shape. So generally after the parade, the pan goes to Haas's for to have sort of a lunch all together. So it's very nice setup. It's and most of the Anvil is I won't say most, but a lot of Anvil is appreciative of our appearance, and we do get some. We'll pray for you and some other things thrown at us, but.
Which always amuses us.
We wave to them and say hi and keep going.
Yeah, so it's a lot more friendly now.
Well, in the past, I've had people run out into the parade to hand me tracts. So it's probably one of the areas we get a little bit more pushback, which is why we keep going back there. Yeah, and it's just an effort to normalize atheism.
And also what's the restaurant that it's? Haas's Steakhouse, which is right across from the marshalling area and the finish of the parade. So we like to usually come on back and have some soup or sandwich or the buffet itself. So it's well worth coming on down the whole street. The main street in Anvil will be lined with people watching, and we feel that there's enough churches groups that are in there. I mean, they're all not walking down the street praying like that, but they've got their banners out that says, you know, something Baptist Church, and you have kids dancing and everything. So, you know, it's important for us to get our 2 cents in and show other non-believers out there that they are really not alone in the area, that they have company. I will turn you over to our co-host this evening and give us some more info.
Yeah, if you can, you might have noticed I've been on a hiatus for a couple of weeks here. Over the last couple of shows, I've been really busy with some of the municipal elections going on in my home county. And unfortunately, they're all too often overlooked by people, but these municipal elections are extremely important, especially the primaries, because in many of these smaller municipalities, it's usually just one party running it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times the primaries can pretty much decide the election. As I know, quite a few elections in my home county were pretty basically decided during the primary. But I mean, we often look at way more attention is put on, you know, the federal level, mm-hmm. to the point where even sometimes the state level is overlooked, even though that's extremely important as well. But the more I've been getting involved in my local politics, it's been, let's just say my head's been starting to hurt with all the things going on there.
Well, when you really get up close and you start examining everything that's going on locally,
yeah.
you say, gosh, there's a lot more to this subject and a lot more to that bill than what you would have seen.
Right, and there's the kind of thing. There's a lot less scrutiny going on, so people tend to get away with a lot more.
Yeah,
and it's, you know, even though it's not like the millions of dollars you see at the state and federal level. You know, my hometown's pretty small, and we still have about $500,000 budget every year. Mm-hmm. And people aren't going to notice if a couple $1,000s go missing here or there, unless you're on top of it. And sometimes you see some of these people have, you know, occupy a couple different spots in their local governments because nobody's running for anything, and a lot of these positions go unfilled. So it's pretty easy to get away with, you know, any sort of corruption at that level.
Yeah, I know no one's looking. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
it's not important.
Or the people who are looking are also your friend, and they went in on it too. Because like in the local government, a lot of times they know each other.
Yeah.
So it's really important that people stay on top of their local governments. And like I said, it's, you know, it's not as much money as higher up, but it's still a lot of it's still enough money to corrupt people if they're not paying attention. And
or tempt people to become corrupt because no one's watching them.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And there's also, you know, sometimes small towns, we just kind of throw up our hands and say, well, we don't have that much money anyway, so that's probably why we're not doing well. Yeah. But as I've been digging into our budgets, I'm like, oh, we've been wasting a lot of money left and right with projects that weren't well thought out. We had there's a project on 5th Street in my hometown where they have to redo some of the sewer pipes, and then they're going to repave it because the street's just in wretched condition. They took a loan out to do the street 2 years ago, but the project won't start until late next year. So you're talking about a $500,000 loan, not doing anything for 3 years.
Yeah.
You know,
and is it still going to be $500,000 3 years from now? I mean,
yeah, and that's the thing. Plus, in that time, yeah, that's the thing. You don't know if the project is going to change between now and then, which is actually looking like it because they didn't get the grant money they were looking for. So it's just all these things where the more I dig into it, or even at the county level, our county commissioners decided to renovate a building for the DA. And I'm like, why didn't you just give him a building and make him deal with it?
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, I could understand like a minor renovation, like maybe you need another phone line, you know, something critical to make the office work.
Yeah.
But to renovate, especially the old building that they're going to renovate, which is going to be even more expensive to do.
Is it crummy old building, so to speak?
Well, it's the courthouse.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, you look at that, and I've been looking at this going, no wonder the county doesn't have any money. If we're just going to spend it on this, you know, and people aren't, you know, on top of them about it.
Well, the trouble is, a lot of times that people will collect money for a particular project, and it gets sort of delayed a little bit, and then some of it gets spent on other things as well. So, you know, you never know for sure what's going on.
Yeah, it's one of the members of my borough council is always, whenever a project proposal comes up, she demands that everything gets itemized. Like, what are our expenses? What are we allocating? And that's good that she's doing that, because sometimes they'll just toss out a project and not really get the specifics down. And there's a good reason they say the devil is in the details, where, you know, you look at, you know, all the different expenses and where you might have been able to shave off here or there.
Yeah. It's like saying, well, they've got a broken down bridge, and we're saving some money to do renovations on this bridge. And it was a very blanket statement, but nothing is actually broken down into like, oh yes, well, the crane will cost, you know, $10,000 a day to rent, and none of the particulars are there, and they just sort of throw everything up in the air and hope that they're close.
Right, and that's the thing, and especially when you have, you know, nobody really running for these local offices, you don't get rid of the people making those mistakes. And I can tell you about half the people on the council, on my hometown council, don't do anything.
Yeah.
Like, I've been to plenty of meetings to see, like, some of these people never say a word at the council meeting other than to vote on an issue. And
they never share their opinions, or
no, they never share their opinions, never scrutinize anything. They never, you know, they're never presenting anything, and you sit there wondering, well, what are they doing? And the problem is nobody's running against them to get them out of there.
Well, no one, because a lot of the time people just don't want the job.
Yeah, and that's understandable in some areas, especially just down the road from my hometown in Duncannon Borough.
Yeah.
They're in a lot of trouble down there. They just recently filed. It's essentially a process you go through before you get to distressed municipality status. But they're heading for distressed municipality.
But I mean, if they get that distressed municipality declaration, if you want, what happens then? I mean, does it open them up for some federal funds, or?
Well, there's a couple of things that happen. One is you can get. Sometimes the state will appoint a receiver to the municipality, which essentially gets works with their finances. That's actually what happened in Harrisburg. Before, I think the receiver now is their mayor, which is good, because unfortunately sometimes when people get appointed a receiver, the receiver just stays there. But I mean, I'm appreciative of the person in Harrisburg actually ran for the office afterward. But the other thing that might happen with Duncannon Borough is they might decide to merge into the surrounding township.
Okay.
Because sometimes, like, a borough is are often very small, especially in my home county.
Yeah.
Like the borough I live in is less than 800 registered voters.
What does it do for police and fire?
Well, typically they're shared by a lot. There's a lot of sharing going on in the townships. okay, trying to give just a visual cue, like, say my borough is like this,
Yeah.
which is Newport Borough. Oliver Township kind of surrounds it,
Yeah.
and then on the other side of the river is Howey Township.
Okay.
All of those townships share the same fire, ambulance, schools, and
Police?
not police, but water and water and sewer.
Do state police
Yeah,
do
there's-
all of them?
Yeah, I think state police handles all of that.
Yeah.
Mostly because none of those townships have enough money to support their own police department.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think Oliver Township just rehired a police officer, but it's just part time. And let's just say I wouldn't depend on him for anything.
Yeah. Well, it's in the hope that there's only part-time crime. So.
Yeah. Yeah, essentially. And unfortunately, people tend to overlook the small town crime, but it's definitely there. I know.
Oh yeah.
And, everywhere has a drug problem now. And that's the thing. It's like we tend to deny that in small towns, but it's definitely
It's there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to live in New Holland, PA, and when I first moved there, oh gosh, over 20 years ago, there was no such thing as crime. No one got shot or drive-by shootings or anyone being killed. And what they had was just a little bit of petty thefts around. You leave your lawnmower out on your front yard, maybe someone will come by and take it. But in the last few years, I heard comments from numerous people how the small crime has just risen. And I had someone come into my garage and steal my 10-speed bicycle, and to top it all off, it went in my next door neighbor's garage and stole his little 8-year-old daughter's bike. That's kind of rotten.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, when my neighbor came next door and he says, hey, he says, do you see anything? Someone's stolen my daughter's bike. And I go, no, I didn't. He says, yeah, I think someone came into the garage.
Yeah.
I said, well, just a minute. And I walked in my own garage, and my bike's gone too.
Yeah. Yeah, and part of the problem is sometimes the local police are not very well trained to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
My twin brother who lives in Marysville, he said his truck got broken into, and he calls the police to make a report of it.
Yeah.
And he tells them what was taken, and the police actually asked him, well, what do you want us to do about it?
Yeah.
And I'm like, make a report? Even if you don't find the people to do it, you at least make a formal report of it.
Yeah.
Especially if, anything that went missing from my truck ends up in a drug bust somewhere. I don't want to be...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, this is the police department here. We just seized some of your property.
Yeah. And that's some of the advantage with the state police because they're so much better trained.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously that's a whole nother discussion there. It's
Mm-hmm.
there too.
And seeing as you're now in the government, you want to stay on the state police's side.
Yeah.
In fact, you want to stay on local police and everyone's good side.
But yeah, kind of bringing this all back around. We kind of wandered around a little bit, but it's just all of these complex issues are decided at the local level.
Yeah.
And the things that lead to these issues are decided at the local level. So it's really vital that people stay active in their local governments. And especially if you look at, say, school boards where I would say the one political office I would never want to hold is on a school board because those get really heated sometimes. And rightfully so. They're controlling millions of dollars, yet they're locally elected, which people tend not to pay attention to.
Well, look at the Dover, Delaware, the Dover trial.
Well, not Dover, Delaware.
No, I
Okay,
take back the Delaware.
It was Dover,
I used to
Pennsylvania.
visit Dover, Delaware.
Yeah.
It just came out naturally.
Yeah.
But I mean, the school board there was just totally fighting with one another over what was it, intelligent design and the books that they were to allow in the school, and finally, of course, like I said, it went to a court case.
Right. Yeah, the 2005 court case, Kissmiller versus Dover.
You
And unfortunately, the school district lost a lot of money fighting that lawsuit.
mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. It's, these local municipalities don't have the money to fight these lawsuits, and it really hurts them when that ends up happening. And of course, they don't care. And there have been a couple of things that happened in my hometown where I'm like, if I wanted to really push, I could take a lot of money from the borough. Well, I wouldn't be taking it, but I could get a national organization to sue my borough for some of the violations that they've done.
Another thing on that with local elections is that board in Dover, Dover, Pennsylvania, was elected at local elections.
Yeah.
And not all the board members were trying to get. The name of the book was Of Pandas and People.
Yeah.
And it was supposedly intelligent design book, but the rough draft of the book didn't say intelligent design.
Yeah,
it said creationism.
Yeah, and some bad
Blatantly
editing left it in there a couple of times.
And it was, and that's another example of why local elections are very important.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the point I was trying to make. And I think part of it is too that people don't really know how to get involved in the local elections either, because it is a bit of a process.
Mm-hmm.
I've been going through it myself this year and making mistakes at almost every turn, because I just, learning how do I get myself on the ballot? How do I go about collecting the signatures needed?
And because it's different in a lot of different areas. So
yeah, and it can be, sometimes you're just not quite sure how to go about it. And I think sometimes a lot of people's disillusionment with politics is really they don't understand it, or they don't know how the process involved. Now sometimes the process could be changed, but I think sometimes I've gotten an understanding of the process and go, okay, that's why they do that. But I wish somebody would have explained that to me at some point.
mm-hmm.
And I think moving forward, I'm going to try and get involved in not necessarily any partisan effort, but sort of nonpartisan efforts to educate people of how to get involved in local governments. I've seen some places do petition signing parties, where they get a lot of people together and okay, you sign mine, I'll sign yours. When we help people get on the ballot, even if you don't end up voting for them, you at least have some local competition. You get to discuss the local issues.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're sort of like a neophyte here, so you're going to be spending the next year learning about everything. But the thing is, at least that's what you're learning is going to be fresh in your mind, and it's not something like someone that's been on, in local politics for decades that have actually forgotten a lot. You're getting everything what's fresh.
Yeah, well, and that's part of it too. Is some of these people get pretty well entrenched there. They know everybody, and it can be hard to get them out if they're doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the frustrating thing about politics is people hate the establishment, so to speak, where all of these people are connected to each other. But even at the local level, it's hard to get anywhere unless you know a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like, how do you avoid it?
The establishment hangs on tooth and nail and wants to keep its influence and its power right where it's at.
Well, but the thing is it's hard to, because you can't get anywhere in politics by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how do you get moving unless you get something resembling an establishment?
Yeah, and someone else backing you up.
Yeah. And you could also say things like the Tea Party sort of started as an anti-establishment movement, but they themselves have become an establishment. So it seems unavoidable at times.
Well, at first everyone was saying, "Oh, the Tea Party here. Gee whiz, we have to." It was a lot of interest there, but then as they became a little more well known, people started to pull away from them because, well, we're not really sure we like what they're doing.
Yes, and unfortunately, it becomes a bit of a novelty sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyway, we kind of ranted on that for about 30 minutes. But yeah, hopefully we can get more people involved in the local levels. Especially, it'd be nice to have a few more atheists, mostly because there, as we've pointed out several times, there are a lot of church-state separation violations that happen at the local level. Now, the good news is there's a lot of religious people who don't want that either. And I want to make it clear, it's like I wouldn't vote for an atheist just because they're an atheist. I know there's a lot of atheists I'd never vote for. But just to have that secular voice in your local governments would be great.
But then again, I
I know the camera guy is giving me a funny look over that.
I also know a lot of religious people that I wouldn't vote for because they use their religion in politics to gain status, and they're talking up their God. And I don't want to vote for someone's God. I want to vote for a candidate that thinks for themselves. I mean, we're not in heaven yet, so you've got to think of not what God wants, but what do all your constituents want here on earth?
Yeah. And sometimes it's not they're not just letting their religion dictate it, they're pretending to be religious. Which kind of brings me to that next topic I'm going to talk about, which is a recent executive order by President Trump, which, and he really got into office trying to pander to the religious right, even though I'm pretty sure he's an atheist, or I don't know, particularly he's so sporadic, I'm not even sure what to make heads or tails of it anymore.
Well, but he, like many other people, until they get in the limelight, never really mention religion. Or church. You look at anything that Trump has said in the past, and you've never heard him say, well, God bless you, or God bless the United States, and everything. Now, he's saying this all the time.
Yeah, and I should say, like, sometimes the politicians may not be faking religion entirely, but I think there are times when it's not that important to them until they start running for office. It's before they might have been nominally religious, but the second they start running for office, then all of a sudden, I am a devout leader. But which brings me to the executive order issued recently, which essentially, there's a lot of vague language to it, but essentially what if you read between the lines and summarize it, what it's doing is it now allows churches to endorse or lobby and endorse a candidate without the risk of losing their nonprofit status. Which is a rule that's been in place since President Johnson. That's why they call it the Johnson Amendment, where no nonprofit can do that and maintain their tax-exempt status. And I think that's the major things that needs to be addressed here, which is so often missed. That rule isn't about what churches can and cannot do. It's about what nonprofits can and cannot do. And unfortunately, that distinction is so often missed, whether intentionally or just people can't make that distinction.
Well, a few years ago, a bunch of us non-believers or atheists actually drove down to Washington, D.C. to attend the Red Mass Now, of course, none of us was Catholic, but when all the the Supreme Court and all the judges and everything attend the Red Mass, we were curious to see whether or not the preacher that was there was going to mention anything political or recommend any one during his speech. And we kind of figured that we were going to really catch him, and had a voice recorder there, just waiting to see. And I must say that they actually refrained from it. It was strictly a Catholic service.
Yeah. Although I'd say in incidences like that, sometimes what you get sometimes are they can craft their words just carefully enough so that they don't cross that line, but everybody knows what they're saying.
Yes.
Where there's enough subtext there to say, yeah, I know everyone knows what they're saying, but you can't legally go after them. But the executive order in particular is problematic on so many different levels. It's hard to know where even to begin. First of all, it gives religious nonprofits a privilege that secular nonprofits don't.
Yeah.
Which is a clear violation of the First Amendment, because that's you want everybody to play by the same rules, and now you're saying no, you don't have to. Yeah. To go by this very critical rule. The second thing is the dangerous interaction it has with other exemptions that religious nonprofits get. Particularly, there's no transparency. They don't have to declare their expenses, their donors, what their staff salaries are. So now you can have a church essentially acting like a super PAC where you have no idea where the money is coming from or where it's going. They can take money from any company, any corporation, any big donor, and give it to any candidate, and who knows where that's going.
Well, I mean, PA non-believers, the paperwork that we have to file to show that we really are non-profit, and that we haven't done anything, and we kind of have to just walk the line to show that we do qualify, and we continue to qualify for the 501c3. Whereas, the churches, they sort of get a one-time exemption. Yeah, well, don't worry about it. Everyone knows that the church is non-profit, and they're not doing anything political. Whereas we more or less have to prove it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, it's actually not that hard to get a religious nonprofit status. A lot of times they don't even charge you the fees for it. And actually, if you want any proof to how easy it is, go watch the episode John Oliver has on churches. You can find it on YouTube, where he's kind of goes after the money of mega churches. It was a great episode. You should definitely check it out. But just to kind of bring his points home, he actually set up a church nonprofit, and just it was so funny how he went off on that. Like and even set a number you could call in, and it was like 1-800 this is legal. It was, and that's the thing too, is now what's to stop someone from just saying they're establishing a church nonprofit, but the whole time what they're really doing is setting up a political activist committee.
Yeah.
And there's no scrutiny there to show that that's what they're doing.
I know it. Reminding everyone that this is a phone-in show, live phone-in show, and the phone number you can call us on in York, PA is up on your screen. So if you have a comment, a complaint, a question, give us a call, and we'll listen to what you have to say.
But yeah, kind of trying to wrap this point up, it's again, it's not, the concern is what a 501c3 can and cannot do. And there are options for churches if they want to endorse a political candidate or do some lobbying. One is they can just not apply for a nonprofit status.
Yeah.
Because if you don't apply for a nonprofit status, you don't have to abide by those rules. And unfortunately, so many times they want it both ways. That's what we saw with the Ark Encounter project, where they wanted all the tax incentives and grants that a for-profit could have, but they wanted to also be allowed to do the discriminatory hiring practices that a nonprofit can do. And you can't do both. You have to pick one or the other.
It's an either or.
Yeah. Now, as far as lobbying goes, they could also file under a 501c4 status, which 501c4s are public welfare. They include like the AARP as a 501c4 because they have this sort of local activism they do, but they're also allowed to spend a portion of their money lobbying. I know the NRA has a 501c4 wing, at least. They're kind of 50-50, I think.
Well, it's, they into different departments, so to speak. They haven't necessarily got it on the whole organization.
Right. Yeah. There's kind of, that's why I said you have different wings of it where they do different things. So I mean, there are options. Churches don't have to take the 501c3 status to exist. But if they do take that status, there are certain rules they have to play by.
Yeah, bookkeeping and taxation.
Right. And although, unfortunately, this executive order might have been useless from the start, because I think only one church has ever lost its nonprofit status over the Johnson Amendment, even though there have been thousands of violations. Mainly because during the Reagan administration, they passed rules to essentially make it so no one's quite sure who can enforce it. And in fact, that happened a couple years ago where like thousands of churches came out endorsing a candidate, and there were people in the IRS who wanted to investigate and go after it, and they were told, no, you can't do that. You don't have the standing to do it. Yeah. And no one was quite sure who had the standing to go do it. But there is going to be some fighting against this. The Freedom from Religion Foundation filed a lawsuit within hours of the executive order being signed. Well, part of the reason they were able to do that is everybody knew this order was coming. Like there was rumblings of it coming for a couple of months now. They just finally went through with it. So hopefully there'll be some success there, but unfortunately other people wanted the order to go farther. So I don't know how this will play out, but hopefully it'll draw some more attention to it to show the problem to at least the religious people who don't want their churches to get involved in politics, which I will say is quite a few people who would rather not see their churches get involved like that. And that's the thing. It's like when it comes to separation of church and state issues, there are a lot of allies to be found, a lot of religious allies to be found.
Yeah.
I know quite a few of the high-ranking people in some of these organizations fighting for separation of church and states are often pastors. And I know pastors have filed lawsuits because they do not want the government getting involved in religion, and rightfully so. Speaking of a place that doesn't have separation of church and state, there was a major story to come out of Ireland over the last couple of months.
The blasphemy law?
Yeah, the British comedian and Stephen Fry, and he was also an outspoken theist activist, came under investigation when Ireland police opened an investigation against him, citing a 2015 remark he made on an episode of an Irish talk show, where someone asked him a question. I can't remember exactly what it was, but rather than just give the more diplomatic answer, he went on a pretty long tirade, and he said, and I quote, "Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain?" And that's just one comment he made out of a couple-minute tirade. But people, there was a couple of complaints that came in about it, but eventually the police dropped the investigation soon after because they said, and I quote, "No one had been harmed by the comment," which we can agree.
Exactly. Yes. No one, no deity is harmed by it.
Right, and that brings up the whole issue of blasphemy. And I note here the law itself was passed in 2009 as part of a larger defamation law, which included a fine for blasphemy.
But I mean, there's still some of those laws that are still on the books here in the States, but they're not enforced.
Right, and that's the problem. Is even if they're unenforceable, that they're on the books, still on the books, is still dangerous.
That's right, but no one really dares confront the people and say, "Hey, look, this is silly. Let's take it off the books," because now all of a sudden religious people are now going to object to that.
Right.
They've got to have some protection against blasphemy.
Yeah, and actually, school prayer is still on the books here in Pennsylvania, even though it hasn't been enforceable since the 1960s. But they had, anyway, and actually, from what I understand, when the complaint came in, it wasn't so much someone got so offended by it. They were essentially pointing out it was an illegal comment. And really, there wasn't any sort of outcry about the remark saying he should be fined. There was a lot of outcry about the law itself being bad for being still there. And in fact, atheists in Ireland issued a press release essentially saying, "Go ahead with it. Go ahead with the investigation. We want this to get
dare you."
Yeah, we want this to get international attention, so everyone can see that this is still a problem.
Yeah.
And in fact, essentially, it had that effect because apparently there were a lot of Irish citizens who didn't know that law existed. In fact, and this is a quote from the Ireland Health Minister, Simon Harris, said, "It's a bit embarrassing." That's a direct quote, and it said also, "It needs to be changed." And they said, there might be more of a push now to get it repealed, and that's why Atheist Ireland issued that remark, was they knew publicity over this was, especially against a well-known figure like Stephen Fry, was going to get a lot of attention.
And we, as Pennsylvania non-believers, we are a co-supporter, you could say, of Atheist Ireland. In fact, we have banners we carry with Atheist Ireland on it that we'll use in parades that we participate in. So we're close to them, and we support them wholeheartedly.
Yeah, we've brought them up quite a few times on the show.
Yeah.
Just talking about the things they're going through there, and a warning of be on guard here for what they're doing. But I think it's. I should point out, though, a couple years ago when Ireland legalized same-sex marriage, there had been some talk about a referendum back then to get rid of the blasphemy law. Unfortunately, it didn't gain much support among the government officials because they thought, well, maybe we're moving a little too fast here. But I would kind of quote, kind of one thing that Martin Luther King Jr. said was, you can't put a timetable on equality. people try to keep saying, no, now's not the right time for this. But if you keep saying that, it'll never be the right time.
No.
I mean, really, it's almost never the right time for this sort of thing.
It's not appropriate at this time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's.
When is the right time?
Yeah, and I've had to make that remark numerous times. Is you have to press the issue to make it the right time.
Which, of course, makes other people angry because they don't want to talk about it.
Right.
And so, no, it's not the right time. Well, let's make an appointment here to discuss it. What's good for you?
Yeah. And the thing is, one of the things I've noticed when you look at social progress, it seems to go in these sort of steps.
Yeah.
First, everybody denies that it's even a problem. Then they're saying, well, it might be a problem, but other people have it worse, so stop complaining.
Then an ostrich mentality.
Yeah. And then they'll go into a point where, well, yeah, it's a problem. Maybe we'll fix it down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to hit the point where maybe they don't want to talk about it. And then the next step is usually to say, well, what about me too?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, usually when you get to the what about me too point, people really aren't interested in about their own problems. They're trying to just shut you up.
Yeah.
So, and I think I found, or maybe they'll point out some other issue and say, well, what about that too? And I find the best the best response to say is like, okay, let's fix both of these problems. And they'll usually just shut right up if you say that. Because they're not really interested in solving problems when they start saying that. So it's hopefully, and I think this maybe the fact that this has gained so much international spotlight will finally get them moving towards repealing the blasphemy law, and hopefully some of the other issues going on in Ireland, from things like no secular school options for parents, or so many other issues facing Ireland, that maybe this could be the first step.
Yeah, hopefully.
But that's about all the material I had. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. I purchased a movie the other day called Hidden Figures. And excellent movie, and I'll read some of it here. Hidden Figures tells the incredible untold story of Katherine Johnson, who was played by Tarawa P. Henson there, Dorothy Vaughan, who's played by Octavia Spencer, we all know who she is, and Mary Jackson, was played by Janelle Monáe. Anyway, it says a brilliant Afro-American women with all master's and bachelor's degrees in science and math, working at NASA, who served as the brains behind the launch into orbit of the astronaut John Glenn, a stunning achievement that turned around the space race. The revolutionary, visionary trio crossed all gender and racial lines and inspired generations. And after seeing the movie, I used to live up in Massachusetts and Vermont at one time, and this was during the same time, in the early 60s, where evidently a lot of this was going on down south, but I never ever really saw much prejudice or riots or anything. I never saw a sign that even said, colored restroom or colored women's room, or this is the colored drinking fountain. Like that. If it's a white drinking fountain, then the black people can't drink out of it. Like somehow they're color is going to, wash off in the water. It was really ridiculous. And one of the examples that they gave in the movie was about one of the characters. Here she is. She had a master's degree in mathematics and in physics, and she was better than a computer, and she didn't have a computer. They didn't really have real computers at that time, and if she had to go to the bathroom, she'd tell them, "Oh, I'm just going to take a break here, and I am going to go to the ladies' room." The only trouble is the nearest colored ladies' room was half a mile away, so she'd have to run out of the building and run half a mile to the nearest colored women's room. And and it really struck me as, it must have been really tough back in those days to be black.
Yeah.
And all the they had this whole group of degreed women that were there, and they were solving the complicated math problems and the physics problems. What was needed to get our first man into orbit. You see a little bit of like the space race, but I mean, it's not. The movie is not based so much on rockets launching and everything, but rather the interaction between the women and the whites and the blacks that they originally had in NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
Yeah.
And the NASA was one of the leading people to sort of get rid of the colored drinking fountains, the colored bathrooms, and the white bathrooms only. And it helped push things along. So what I say is that if you see the movie, I got it on sale. Rent it, buy it, whatever you want. It's well worth watching.
It's a bit embarrassing. As much as we love the space program here, you still have to understand like some of the injustice that went on during it. Mm-hmm. During the Mercury program, they also tested several female pilots and found that many of them scored better than the men in several categories, especially in ability to kind of seep their sanity in isolation. Mm-hmm. A couple of them did phenomenally better than the men, and they ended up being excluded for various reasons, all coming back to gender.
And they fared better also. Women fared better in gravity tests, when they put them in a centrifuge and spin them, where some of the men would pass out from the G-forces like that. The women were still growing, going strong. Yeah. So
so it's one of those things you have to. It's important to acknowledge that happened. I think, and it's. A lot of this when people say, well, make America great again. And I'm like, when were we ever that great?
Jim, didn't I say that to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I said, give me a time when America was great. Give me a date on it. Yeah. I mean, if they say make America great again, then that must mean that at one time or another, it was great. And I just want to know when it was great and when we lost it.
Yeah. And I mean, even something like one of our biggest triumphs, the space program.
Yeah.
Everybody points to that as what made us great. We had racial and gender inequality going on in it. We left a sign on the moon saying we came in peace for all mankind,
Yeah.
while we were dropping tons of bombs on Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, as I think it was Carl Sagan, as Carl Sagan would put it, you know, only we would brag about coming in peace to a lifeless rock.
Yeah. Let me just switch over to one of my favorite figures, Melania Trump. Have you noticed that as she went over to with the president across the sea to those Arab countries, she did something that no one else has really done. She didn't wear a headscarf. Everyone else wears a headscarf, and they show all respect for the religion over there when all the women are wearing headscarves. But it's funny, you never ever see someone from a Muslim country come over here, and when they get in America, take off the headscarf out of respect for the American way of life. Also, did you see they had on CNN News, they were walking out of the Air Force One, and Donald puts his hand out to hold her hand, and as they walk in unison, and she just bats his hand away, and you know she didn't have a pleasing smile on her face. But I thought, gee, did they have an argument on Air Force One? Makes you wonder. Now I know that she's the first lady, but considering she's probably one of the best looking first ladies around, I kind of refer to her as first babe, you know. But then again, I don't mean that as disrespectful. I mean that as nice looking woman. At least Trump has got good taste in his choice of women. Mm-hmm. What can I say? Anyway, we're going down to the nitty gritty here and down to the wire.
Yeah.
A couple of minutes, just a little cartoon that I saw in the American Atheist Journal, and it was kind of funny. Here, it's got these two people sitting on a park bench, and this woman says there, God changed my life. Then you look over at the guy, and he's got a monkey on his back with the Pope's hat on. It says, yeah, changed my life too. I used to be self-reliant and autonomous. So, anyway, that's basically the way that you feel, because if you kowtow to what some person's idea of a God is, or their religion is, then really you have no freedom yourself.
Yes, Christopher Hitchens used to say, take the risk of thinking for yourself. It's it is worth it. It is. Okay, well, we got to wrap it up.
Yeah,
thanks for tuning
about 10
in.
seconds.
We'll catch you next episode.
And see you in about 2 or 3 weeks.